Yoko Ono once said that you can change the world by being yourself. And she is Season 5 villain vibes. In last week's video, we fixed gay denial in relationships and dating. Good for us! In this week's microdose of wisdom, we will tackle and solve all issues related to the gay party scene and how it can leave us feeling a little bit detached from our lives during the week.
Once upon a time in a fabulous land, where morals are sparkly and fables are grand. Aesop's tales with a wise man's twist, serving wisdom on a glittery dish.
Hello, and welcome back to Aesop's Fables, your weekly dose of classic tales with a modern gay twist. I'm Matt, your modern day fabulist, and you are my Fable babies? My fabies. This is the second episode of my very first YouTube channel, where I take inspiration from Aesop and his fables, but update the morals to be more relevant for modern gay men. I also make the animal characters gay as hell. I did a little intro about myself last week, but for anyone who's new, I'll do a little recap. I have some expertise in the world of mental health, in research, in storytelling, and most importantly, an encyclopedic knowledge of pop culture. Also, I have a PhD. Pretty huge debt. I'm here to read out a fable of my own creation that tells the story of sexy gay animals facing modern gay problems. We'll then have a little discussion about the main themes. A gentle reminder that this is not therapy, even if some of those themes do touch on some pretty heavy issues facing our community. This should just be a little moment each week to reflect and always remember there are people out there who can help you with anything. And with those important disclaimers out of the way, today I'm going to read you an original tale, The Dragon Flower. Deep in the forest grew a magnificent flower with curling petals of brilliant orange and yellow, and with a deep crimson red stem. This flower stood out among the shadows, mystery, and darkness of the surrounding forest. For many animals, this was their light in the darkness. This was the dragon flower. What started as a secret for only the coolest of forest dwellers, the dragon flower had quickly become the centerpiece of forest life. You see, the dragon flower was special. The dragon flower would only bloom on a Saturday evening around 11 p.m, no matter the weather, the season, the year. Around 11 p.m. each Saturday evening, the dragon flower would unfurl, revealing a pool of deep, rich nectar that put all other flowers to shame. This nectar fed the animals in the know until 6 in the morning, when the dragon flower would reseal itself shut and hibernate for another week. The bees, bats, moths, butterflies would gorge themselves in hedonistic splendor, eventually collapsing and retreating to their hives, cocoons, and caves to recover. Far from this part of the forest was an ordinary, gentle, but sexy hummingbird. A gay one. This hummingbird was in his early 30s, let's say in hummingbird years. I haven't looked this up. And he had spent his 20s on earnest, wholesome ventures. Foraging, building nests, shopping for indoor plants. The hummingbird was a growing boy and had always made sure he had enough nectar to fill his belly. Under his bird-like abs, of course. He had a good source of flowers around him, and he enjoyed nothing more than tending to his garden, going to his corporate finance job, and doing half marathons with his straight bird friends from Flight University. F.U. He had known of the gay scene, but he rarely entered that part of the forest. He had initially been dragged there by dates he had met on Flapper, the gay bird dating app. He had enjoyed himself, but wasn't necessarily for him. He wasn't outwardly against it, oh no, but just something never quite felt right, watching animals be so open and comfortable with themselves. So he would be sensible. After watching the flamingos and the birds of paradise do their little drag shows, he would fly himself home to the other part of the forest, tuck his little wings in, and be asleep by 11 p.m. This had actually put him at odds with the birds he was meeting on Flapper, as he could never really find a flock that were like him. He had one wing in and one wing out. But even with this very limited exposure, he started hearing whispers of the dragonflower, not by name, but by reputation. But after his 30th birthday, he found his curiosity starting to grow. Why live in the forest if you don't take advantage of all of it? The light and dark of the woods. He started light by asking the birds on Flapper about their experiences in the deep, dark parts of the woods. He noticed that they were also all up really early on a Sunday morning, just like him. One fateful night, he agreed to accompany a friendly wood pigeon into the deep, dark forest, lit only by the unfurling flames of the dragonflower. He was nervous, but he did as the wood pigeon instructed. He put on a tight black vest top, a very serious look on his face, and off he went. When he arrived, he talked to the other nectar lovers, everyone waiting around with excited anticipation for the unfurling. He didn't know what to expect, and the other animals, birds, insects seemed excited on his behalf. He was about to experience something for the first time, and they never would again. The unfurling happened. The flaming petals opened up, and the rich and kind of chemical smell wafted down the line of animals waiting for the sweet release it promised them. They let the hummingbird go up first. He cautiously dipped his long beak into the depths of the flower, gently letting out his long tongue. This was the moment his new life began. The next 7, 8, 9 hours passed by in a blur of euphoria, ecstasy, and copious amounts of bird sweat. He somehow made it home to his little nest, where he closed his little leaf curtains and shut out the light. But all was not well. The hummingbird woke up late on Sunday, disoriented and dry of beak. He didn't feel like doing anything or talking to anyone. He still felt rough on Monday, and although he felt better rested by Tuesday, he found himself irritable, despondent, joyless. When he awoke on Wednesday, life started to feel hopeful again. He managed to get back to the aviary, his gym, and work started feeling engaging and even meaningful again. By Thursday, he was feeling good as new. And the end of the week was in sight! His wood pigeon friend had introduced him to so many amazing new creatures, and they had invited him back to the Dragonflower that Saturday night. Friday and Saturday was spent in a blur of anticipation. Over the next weeks and months, he got to know the characters at the Dragonflower. There were an eclectic mix of birds who had become convinced this was the only nectar worth drinking. There were the wise yet flamboyantly dressed older wise owls. They would occasionally dabble in the nectar, but it was every so often, and you know that they were heading home to bed at 3 a.m. There were the mutton, dressed as ram, with their muscular, rammy, masculine demeanor, hiding their insecurities about aging off the scene. They looked at the wise, fabulous, older, flamboyant owls with disdain. The little hummingbird started to feel at home with his dragonflower family. He knew absolutely nothing about them, but he loved them all the same. They just got it. His FU friends still called him and texted him and invited him to things, but he found himself sitting there anxiously at the pub or the house party, tokenistically smiling whilst looking at his phone, anxiously awaiting for any confirmation that his friends were heading to the Dragonflower. Gradually, he started to make excuses. They just didn't get it. But his moods were getting worse. He was always so irritable at work, and his co-workers were starting to notice a sharpness that didn't used to be there before. In contrast, when slurping the dragon nectar, he was open, elated, and quickly becoming the life of the party. He His weeks were passing him by, and Saturday was the only day of interest. Everything else was just filler. But he was smart for a hummingbird. He started to realize he was losing himself. He didn't even know which feelings were his anymore. The highs and lows were because of the nectar. He knew he had to stop, and he did. He was so worried about what his life would look like without his new flower friends. The wood pigeon kept calling him every week, inviting him back to the dragonflower. The hummingbird would suggest that they maybe meet up midweek for an after-work hover. The wood pigeon said, "Yeah, of course, I'll be there," and then, as the day came, found some excuse to not come every single time. It was dawning on the hummingbird that maybe it was the dragonflower that had connected them. The first few weeks were very tough on the hummingbird. He did what he had to do. He went to work, he tended to his garden, he tried his little half marathons, but he had tasted ecstasy, and nothing would ever taste the same again. But he kept at it. He spent some time with the wise, fabulous owls. They would take him to tree art galleries. You can tell I'm running out of forest equivalencies here. He started to notice the quieter joys in his life. The beauty of sunlight dappling through the treetops. The feeling of quiet accomplishment when his garden began to bloom again. The hilarity of a toad's appearance. What the fuck is that? He realized that he's not only capable of a variety of experiences, but he also needed a variety of experiences in his life to feel whole. And soon, there was only room for one nectar. This story's moral is a very simple one. Stay high to avoid the come down. Thank you. The main message today is don't sacrifice 6 days of your week for one. Today's tale was based on the classic Aesop fable, The Little Addict Bunny. So today I'm actually not going to be speaking about addiction with you, although it would seem like I would given the strong emphasis and undertones in the deep, dark forest. We know that substance abuse issues are irrefutably more rife in the gay community, particularly in major cities. We also know that gay men are more likely to struggle with substance abuse issues if they have predominantly gay male friends. So we have a bit of a chicken-egg situation here. Do people who are more likely to abuse substances live in major cities and tend to find one another? Or do people in major cities have greater exposure, access, and motivation to try substances? What I want to talk about today are two things related to the gay scene and the party scene in particular. The first is the role of belonging. A sense of belonging is integral to our sense of self and our sense of well-being. As gay people, we know we're not always born with a sense of belonging, and in fact sometimes explicitly feel like we don't belong. Big cities are havens for people who feel like they don't belong. In fact, it's just a collection of lost little bunnies all hopping around trying to belong. You belong because you don't belong. But this story also shows a slightly harder side of that scene, specifically when you mistake scene friends for real friends. I'm an old bitch, so I've seen this happen a million times. Last week I talked about how for whatever reason I'm hopeless in romantic relationships, but the one credit I'll give myself is I've always had an excellent group of friends who have really nurtured a sense of belonging for me. And in many ways this has protected me from scene friends. Side note, I actually have a very healthy attitude towards people I meet on the scene who are scene friends. I think if you expect them to just have that sort of light and more superficial engagement, I have a really good time with them. It's when you have this misalignment of expectations, and that's where the belonging part happens. If you want to run into someone, kiss them on the cheek, know nothing about them and say, God, I fucking love them, that's actually a really fun place to be. But when you're struggling or you're down and out and they're not there for you when you expected them to be, you can end up more vulnerable than when you started. A friend of mine has fallen in with the EDM crowd over the last couple of years, and historically he'd had more straight lady friends. It's pretty much all he does every weekend. His Instagram is constantly littered with videos from raves and dance clubs. I'm sure he's having a great time. But we have spoken about mixing up his routine and just actually how he's a bit tired in lots of ways. The big barrier for him is that he is genuinely worried that he will lose his friends if he stops going to these places. He doesn't think he can take those friendships off the scene. The other point I wanted to discuss today is the role of rituals in facilitating that sense of belonging. Rituals are routines with cultural meaning. Routine is a repetitive behavior or set of behaviors, and the goal really behind a routine is to make what you're doing more efficient the more you do it. You speed up the process and it's about getting the job done. Ritual, on the other hand, is a routine, so we do have these little shortcuts in our thinking and our behavior, but the behaviors have cultural meaning. In fact, the cultural comes from the fact that the routines are a shared set of behaviors with you and the people who are like you. In many ways, these behaviors replace language and how we communicate who we are and to whom we belong. The gay scene is made up of rituals. The way we dress, the music we listen to. In London, it comes down to the pre-drinks you have at people's new build apartments before going out, black vest tops, the photo booth at Feel It. I mean, I once got told off by a friend for wearing white socks to an East London rave. There's a lot of benefits to being able to recognize people who are like you. It makes sense. But it can also be quite limiting. And so, my advice is find a little bit of meaning each day, not skip through the days to find meaning on the weekends. This isn't a well-being lecture. This is a well-roundedness lecture. And personally, I find anyone who does just one thing to be really fucking dull. So I say foster your own rituals that help you belong to you, not just to a community. Thank you for listening in to my rather lectury episode this week. I didn't mean it to get this lectury from the offset, but I just couldn't help myself. And if you are struggling with anything that's been discussed today, please talk to someone close to you, or if it's more comfortable, a professional. I promise, next week we'll be back to slutty animals in loosely veiled gay woodland settings. If you do enjoy this content, please subscribe if you want to, comment, like. I'd love to hear more suggestions for future fables and also any discussions around what we've talked about today, as long as it's respectful. Have a moral week, Fabies.
Days of fables, it's the tea, it's the show. Lessons in love with a fabulous glow. Quick wit, sharp, he'll strut the moral road. Gather round, hun, let the gay story unfold.